Welcome back, gardening friends. So it's October 17th, like 1:15 in the afternoon. We've been getting sun and shade today, so I'm hoping to beat, I don't know, looks like we could maybe get some rain. It's time for our October checkup in the pollinator habitat. Things have certainly changed since September. The goldenrod is now all gone to seed pretty much. There aren't too many things left blooming. We do have a couple of two new plants that we can talk about. But since we're at the front of the garden, I thought I'd start here. Last month I had weeded this, and I did, before we got some rain, some much needed rain in September, I did seed down the white clover, and it is doing pretty well. So I also see in here, though, it's the sticky cleavers, and it kind of pulls up hard even though it has a little wispy root. So that weed, it's an annual. It germinates in the fall, and then it's ready to go in the spring. It blooms like end of May into June, but the leaves are very sticky, the seeds are very sticky, and it will climb up through your plants, and it can engulf a plant quite easily. So now is actually a good time to scout for those fall germinating weed seeds, and sticky cleavers is one of those. Garlic mustard also is. And I've been pretty happy with the lack of garlic mustard coming up in the bed this year. So let's just do a quick pan. The sedums are pretty much, they've been done. I healed in a Cornus moss, which is a non-native dogwood. It's healed in over here for the winter. I bought it probably in May. I've always wanted one. It blooms very early in the spring with yellow blooms. And I found a good deal on one, but then I wasn't quite sure where I wanted it. And of course we had such a dry summer. It actually probably did better in the pot on my porch than if I had forgotten to water it in the ground. So it's just healed in for the winter. I basically dug a hole, put the root ball in, didn't tear it apart or anything, put dirt around it, and then I enclosed it so that the deer, and the rabbits, especially the rabbits, don't chew on it through the winter. The hardy azuratum has settled in nicely. And it's been pretty birdy here the past week or so. I've had some migrants flying through. Last week I had ruby-crowned and gold-crowned kinglets. Oh, I'm gonna see. That might even be a hairy woodpecker. That's a large woodpecker. I don't know if you can see it. I had the kinglets, I had chickadees, I had tufted titmice, white-throated sparrow, red-breasted nuthatch. They all kind of hung out in the back in the hedgerow for several days last week. I had pine siskin show up, and then today I noticed I had some yellow-rumped warblers and more pine siskin. The pine siskins were actually at the feeder. The warblers were in my sumac, and they may actually be back in here. So birds are moving south. I'm happy to see them here because it means I've got a pretty good habitat. And there's a sparrow over there. And I just saw a female cardinal. And you can hear the red-winged blackbirds. Oh, here's I think that's the warbler flitting around up there. There's a pair of them. So this is a black walnut, and the warblers of course eat insects, so they're looking for insects. Yellow-rumped warblers are one of the last warblers to move through. The blue jays have been around, as well as my regular, year-round species. So what have we done in the past month? Well, we finally got some rain. I had been watering because it had been dry. We got a good 2 inches in the course of a week, which is when I seeded the clover. So I did go through and seed some. And my bulbs, most of my bulbs have arrived. So most of them are in, well, all the ones that I've gotten so far in the ground. I've got one little order left. So I ended up putting in a few non-native daffodils in the front here. They'll be up in the spring. More for me than the insects. Wanted some early spring color because this bed will really be more of a summer, fall spot in the garden. And eventually, I don't really want to call this garden. I want to call this habitat. I want it to be lower maintenance. So maybe I just come in and cut some of the stems down late in the spring. I did add some phlox. I don't know if I talked about that last month, but I had some phlox that I had to move from my porch garden. So phlox is native. The Phlox paniculata is a native plant, even though when I moved here, well, it's one of my seeded hybrids, so it's not a name variety. It's one of my seedlings. And I'm gonna say what else we have going on in here. So the goldenrod is done. The flat-topped aster is pretty much going to seed. This has gone to seed. Oh, you can see the seeds right in here. So hopefully they'll seed themselves around. The clover with some rain has really come back. That had gotten chomped on. I added a couple of stepping stones for my little pathway here so I can see where to go through. And let's check back in here. The Christmas ferns are doing well. The maidenhair looks a little rough. Hopefully that'll come back. But the hardy azuratum, even though I transplanted it when it was in full bloom, is doing just fine. So I think that will settle in and do just well next year. Oh, the fragrant aster has started blooming. I think that started a week ago. So this was three new plants that I put in this year. And it's fragrant aster. So for late shows in the garden, definitely go with asters. And then our plum peachy narrow-leafed ironweed has put on a show. Last month it was just starting to bloom. And I do like this. So there's 2 plants here. And this is the latest blooming ironweed I have in my garden. The rugosa rose is actually giving us a little bit of fall color. Hopefully it will settle in and come back next year. We did have some leaf scorch issues with it, but it's got some new growth, so I think it'll settle in and be okay. And then this is a helianthus. This is autumn gold. It just started blooming this past week or so. Now, I haven't seen any insects on it yet. The helianthus family is part of the sunflower family. And This isn't a real tall helianthus. So tall as my knee, so 2 feet, maybe a little bit more. And back in here, I've got an evergreen. This is Western arborvitae, so it's supposed to be deer proof. We'll see. But I did want to put something else in here to replace the trees I had to take out. And the pokeweed. I'm thinking I may leave the pokeweed back in here. It's not really garden, and the birds will like the berries. The Amsomnia has given us a show with its yellow foliage. And I ended up cutting back the Culver's root that looked like it had something fungal going on with it. And then I did give it a shot of a organic fungicide. I soaked the stems. The purple Culver's root, I just took out the ones that look like they might be infected. And the purple Culver's root on this side also, I cut that back. Now normally I wouldn't cut back stuff in here. A lot of our native bees will use these taller stems next year for nesting, especially ones that tend to be a little hollow. So the hollow Joe Pye, if you have raspberry canes, I think Culver's root is one of those. I've been doing some research and reading on some articles I've seen as far as cutting things back in the fall. And if you need to tidy up a spot, the recommendation is, because apparently most bees use the bottom 18 inches of a plant if they're going to use it, is to, you know, maybe cut down to a foot so you've got some tidiness, and then leave those. Because next year, once they've started to break down a little bit and they're easier for a bee to get into, they'll actually use those to lay their eggs in. So cleaning up in the spring, you want to wait till we've had like at least 5 days in a row with temperatures over 50. So some of these early native bees can actually hatch out. And I ended up planting 3 different varieties of Chemisia in here. So they're all shades of blue. I've got the pale blue, I think it was blue sky, cerulean, and then one that will be a kind of wisteria blue. So I planted them in here amongst the native perennials, and then I did put down clover seed. So this is going to be another patch of clover. And I forget what I ended up putting in here because the Aurelia was done for. And this I just did, so the seed hasn't germinated. Oh, there was an allium there. So I did put some non-native alliums in. They will be blooming probably in May. The bees do like the alliums, so I decided to include a few in the bed here. And I think I put some alliums, I mixed them in where the amaranth was. So there'll be something blooming in here in May. Otherwise, this is going to be a late season. So with the Chemisia and the alliums, we'll have some spring color in here. And I've been pretty happy. The mulch and the clover have kept out a lot of the garlic mustard. I need to scout around to see if we've got garlic mustard coming up anywhere. I still have some in the garden. At this point in its life stage, it's hard to pull out by hand. So there's a patch over here. It's actually a little bit easier to pull out just before it's blooming because The plant is a biennial, so it'll be at the end of its life cycle. But I may come in and grub some of this out so that I don't have to worry about it in the spring. All right, well, I think that's a good update on our October garden, our pollinator bed, and we'll see what happens in a month if there's snow on the ground, or we can do another update just to see what's going on. And I hope you've enjoyed the October update of the pollinator garden.